Before the story begins, imagine this for 1 second. A young black doctor, overlooked, doubted, and nearly fired, walks into a silent hospital room to change a routine bandage. And what happens next will expose hidden crimes, stolen fortunes, buried identities, and a truth so powerful it will change lives forever. So if you're in the USA and you love stories where justice hits hard, destiny strikes unexpectedly, and the impossible becomes real, make sure you hit subscribe right now, because stories like this don't just entertain. They wake something up inside you. And now the story begins. The hospital room smelled faintly of antiseptic and old money, the kind of room reserved for donors whose names were etched onto wings and plaques, and Dr. Elijah Moore stood quietly beside the bed of Margaret Whitmore, the millionaire philanthropist who had been in a coma for 11 months, her silver hair neatly brushed every morning by private nurses who whispered about her fortune, her will, and the powerful people circling like vultures, and Elijah, young, black, exhausted, and still, carrying the weight of being constantly questioned in a system that treated him like a guest instead of a physician, had been assigned the most boring task of the night shift: change a bandage on her forearm where an IV-related wound refused to heal, a task beneath his training, but not beneath his humility. And as he gently unwrapped the gauze, he noticed something no one else had noticed before: a faint scar beneath the bruising shaped like a crescent moon intersected by a straight line, a symbol his grandmother once warned him never to forget, a mark used decades ago by a secretive adoption network that trafficked children of color into wealthy families under the guise of philanthropic rescue. And his hands froze for a moment, because his grandmother had been a nurse too, fired in the 1980s for asking too many questions, and she had whispered that mark to him the night before she died, telling him if he ever saw it again, it meant someone powerful had stolen a life. And as Elijah leaned closer to rewrap the bandage, Margaret's fingers twitched, just slightly, enough to make him step back and check the monitors. And then it happened. Her eyelids fluttered like they were fighting gravity itself, and in a hoarse whisper that barely escaped her throat, she said a single word: Elijah, even though no one had spoken his name. And alarms didn't go off because her vitals barely changed, but Elijah's entire world did, because she wasn't supposed to wake up. Not now, not ever, according to the neurologists. And when she opened her eyes fully, cloudy but focused, she locked onto him with fear and recognition and whispered, "They lied. You're the only one I can trust." And before he could call for help, she gripped his wrist with surprising strength and slid something into his palm, a tiny flash drive warm from her skin. And then her eyes rolled back, and she slipped once more into unconsciousness just as footsteps approached, and Elijah hid the drive instinctively, his pulse racing, because he knew in that instant that he had crossed an invisible line. And when the head nurse arrived, she glanced at him suspiciously, asking why he looked shaken, and he lied smoothly, something he hated doing, saying the bandage had bled more than expected. But from that night forward, Elijah noticed subtle changes: security guards lingering too long, administrators suddenly questioning his credentials again. His schedule shifted erratically, and when he finally watched the contents of the flash drive at home, he realized why. Because it contained video logs recorded by Margaret before her coma. Contents of the flash drive at home. He realized why. Because it contained video logs recorded by Margaret before her coma, detailing how she had discovered that her entire fortune had been built on stolen identities, manipulated investments, and the systematic silencing of anyone who got too close, including Elijah's grandmother, whose firing had been engineered by Margaret's own adopted son, Thomas Whitmore, now a powerful hospital board member. And the twist that shattered Elijah completely was Margaret's confession that she herself had been one of the stolen children, taken from a black family in Louisiana in 1962, raised as white, groomed into wealth. And when she tried to expose the truth, Thomas had poisoned her slowly, inducing the coma to seize control of her assets. And the only reason she had awakened was because Elijah had unknowingly applied pressure to a nerve near the scar that triggered a buried memory response, something experimental neurologists hadn't considered. And suddenly, Elijah wasn't just a doctor. He was the key to unraveling a crime spanning generations. But every step he took to report it was blocked. Internal affairs dismissed him. Police stalled. And when his apartment was broken into, he realized they weren't just watching him. They were hunting him. And the story twisted again when Margaret woke up a second time, fully conscious this time, demanding to see Elijah by name, causing chaos among the staff. And when Thomas arrived, furious and composed, Margaret looked him dead in the eye and said, "You are not my son," triggering a public confrontation that couldn't be buried. And as she spoke, she revealed the truth aloud, that Elijah's grandmother had been her sister, that Elijah himself was her blood, that the mark on her arm was meant to be erased but never fully disappeared, and the hospital erupted as journalists caught wind, lawsuits exploded, frozen accounts were reopened, and Thomas tried to flee the country only to be arrested with evidence pulled from the flash drive. And the final twist came when Margaret rewrote her will live on camera, leaving her fortune not to institutions but to community hospitals, medical scholarships for Black students, and to Elijah, not as a reward, but as restitution. And months later, when the dust settled and Elijah stood at the dedication of a new medical wing bearing his grandmother's name, he realized that the bandage he changed that night hadn't just healed a wound, it tore one open that had been hidden for 60 years. And sometimes waking someone up doesn't happen in a miracle moment. It happens because the right hands finally touch the truth. No,